So in my house, sex was something that we didn't really talk about ever. In fact, my mom kind of had this saying that anytime you asked her something like, Mom, have you ever smoked pot? She'd say, once, and I didn't like it. Mom, have you ever been fingered? Once, and I didn't like it. Mom, do you ever give a blowjob to anyone? Once, and I didn't like it. That's all we heard from her. I think that was sort of her way of answering the question and then just like moving on. I dealt with it, we're done. So as you can imagine, I had a lot of questions about sex growing up, a lot of curiosity, a lot of just not being sure of how it worked, why you did it, all that stuff. But to my parents' credit, it wasn't just my parents that weren't really talking to me about this. It seemed to be all of the adults everywhere, who were very, very mysterious about the whole thing, that seemed like it should be something that should be very simple to explain. For example, I remember in second grade, my teacher pulling out a book, and it was a children's book, and it was illustrated with this sort of like color paper cutout shapes, and the book was called something like, Everybody Does It. And it was an exciting book, and each page had a pair of animals on it. So on the first page, it'd be something like 2 cows humping, and you could see inside of the animals kind of x-ray style, so you'd see a little cow dick, inside a little cow vagina, you'd be doing it, and at the bottom would say, cows do it. Then you flip the page, there'd be 2 little chickens like going at it, little chicken dick, little chicken vagina, and say, chickens do it too. Carry on, yes. And it started like making a little bit of sense to me. It was looking good, and I was excited to see the last page because I knew it was going to be on the last page, you know. So we get to the last page, and it's 2 people, but the people are in a bed, and they're up to their neck in a sheet. And they're not touching, and they're not looking at each other, and they're not hugging, and they're not kissing, and nothing. And at the bottom it says, and people do it too. The end. So this was very confusing for me for a very, very, very long time. I just sort of assumed that 2 people got into bed, some sperm would run out of dick, up your leg, into your vagina, and a baby was born. But no, I found out later that's not how it works. In fact, when I turned about 11, I learned a lot more about sex. I was at a friend's house, and we were kind of bored, and we're like going through her mom's stuff, because that's what you kids do when they're bored. And we found this book called The Joy of Sex, the 1971 edition. A lot of Bush. It was exciting. Yeah. And we learned a lot from that book. Finally, things seemed to be a lot more clear. Things sort of made sense. I understood what the animals were doing a lot better, too. It was, like, really awesome. And we felt good about it. We felt excited. We felt like we were learning. We felt like we were growing up. We felt like we were understanding sex in a whole new way. And the other thing I remember very clearly about that book was the way that it made me feel down here. Kind of funny and tingly. It was kind of nice. And it was good. And it was something to celebrate. Until her mom caught us, and she took the book away. Around this same time, my parents had won a back massager at my school auction. And at the time, I didn't really think too much about it. And on another boring afternoon, when I was with the same friend, I kind of happened to mention it to her, and she said, hey, let's pull it out and give each other massages. It'll be great. We'll play spot. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. Yeah, let's do that. So I run to my mom's room, we pull it down, I plug it in, I turn it on, it makes a sort of like a soothing sound. It's nice. Kind of massage each other for a little while, and that got old really fast. So I start kind of screwing around with it, trying to make her laugh, and I put it on my elbow, and I'm like, look, I'm massaging my elbow, and she's laughing, and I'm like, oh, I'm massaging my head, and she thinks that's so funny. I think, well, what's funnier than that? I know, well, I'm massaging my butt, and I kind of sit on it, and all of a sudden, I feel this feeling that I had never felt before. Actually, I'd kind of felt it before when I had been reading the Joy of Sex book. Similar feeling, times about 1,000. I'm having this feeling, and I look my friend dead in the eye, and I say, you have to go home now. So I send her on her merry way. I run back upstairs, I pull down the device, I plug it in, I turn it on, it makes this sound, I sit on it. And I experienced the best feeling I'd ever experienced in my entire life. It was really wonderful. And I knew it was good. I knew it was like a good thing. I knew it had something to do with sex, but I also knew I couldn't tell my parents. I couldn't tell any adult because they seemed to be so weird about this stuff, right? So I had to sneak around and use it on the sly. So I thought I was being real sneaky about it. I'd go visit it every so often for the next couple of weeks, and everything was going okay until one day I go up there and it's gone. It's just gone. I spent 2 whole days looking for it and I can't find it, and I'm getting a little desperate. Because this amazing world had been open to me and now was sliding out of my fingers and right in front of my very eyes. So I decided I would do what any logical thinking person would do. I went directly to my mother and said, "Where is the back massager?" And as I asked her that, I saw in her eye that, well, she has 2 eyes, by the way. I saw in her eyes that she knew what I'd been doing. And she looked at me all side-eyed and she goes, "I gave it away." Who buys a back massager and then just gives it away like 3 weeks later? That is not a thing that happens. So I was pretty embarrassed about that whole thing, but way more than embarrassed, I was so horny. And I needed to find something to replace this thing. So I went on a hunt for anything that vibrated. So I was like going around the house, I'm like sitting on my washing machine, and I'm like, no, that's not gonna do it. And I'm trying to like ride the vacuum cleaner, and that's not really working. And you know, I finally totally understand why prepubescent girls are constantly asking their mothers for horses. Could have used one of those, for sure. But I was not one to ever give up hope. So I racked my brain. I just thought, okay. What has a motor? What has a motor? What has a motor? And all of a sudden I realized I had this toy that my dad had gotten me. And it was called something like, I want to say it was an erector set, because that's funny, but it wasn't called that. It was called something like Connectix or something, and it had little gears in it, and you put the pieces together and you could put some wheels on it. And the best part about it was it came with a motor and a little battery pack, and so the little thing would go along. It wasn't really that fun to play with, but it had this fucking motor. So I took it with the battery pack and I hid in the bathroom in our basement, and I started screwing around with it, trying to figure out, well, how can I get this to do something good? And to be honest with you, it was very painful. It wasn't really working out right away, but then I realized, as I didn't want to give up, I realized if I put enough layers between my body and this thing, there would be this sort of general vibration sense in this area that was kind of similar to the back massager. One thing that was different from the back massager was while the massager had that lovely sort of soothing sound, this had more of like a tone to it. Not the kind of thing you'd hear in a spa, perhaps. But that was okay, because we were in business. It was going to be great. But I knew because I made so much sound, I was going to have to be a little bit more sneaky with it. It was going to be fun, but we were going to have like a relationship that would parallel no other relationship ever in the history of vibrator and woman. So I proceeded to like sneak around, and when my parents weren't home, or when I was right after school, or whenever I could, I'd sneak and go visit my little homemade vibrator. And in fact, I used it so much that I started to kind of wear it out a little. In fact, there were these 2 wires that connected the batteries to the motor, and eventually the little plugs that would connect into the battery part fell off, and the wire just got like real raw, and like worn out. So I would just hold the wires to either side of the battery, just give them a little rock off like that. It's great. Yes, scary, but it was fine. I was happy. It was like the best time of my life at that time. It was really exciting, and I thought everything's going to be great. We're all going to be good. They'll never find out until one fateful day. Puberty is a bitch. And you never know how you're going to feel from one day to another. And I think on this particular day, little Jimmy had probably rubbed up against my boob one too many times in math class or something. And I was feeling like a little horny, and I was like, I need to use my thing. I got to use it like really, really bad, really, really bad. So I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went through a whole dinner thinking about it. I was like, I'm going to sneak off right after dinner. I'm going to try to figure out a way to use it somehow. And unfortunately, that particular day, my dad decided that he wanted to watch TV downstairs, which he never, ever, ever did. So I kind of went down with him and was like, are you done yet? Are you going to just keep watching more shows? Why are you going to do that to me? And finally, I couldn't hold it anymore. I was like in agony. And I just sort of stood up and said, I have to use the bathroom now. And so I just went into the bathroom and I pulled out my little device. And as soon as I put those little raw wires onto the ends of the batteries, and it made that grrr sound, I knew I was going to be busted. And I thought, oh, God, this is not a good idea. I should not do this. I did it anyway. About 20 minutes later, I was finished, and I just really realized, I'm going to be in such big trouble. He's going to be so weird about this. He's going to be mad. It's going to be awkward. It's going to be awful. As I put my little thing away, I step out. I'm ready to face the music. And he says, nothing. And I think either I totally got away with this, or what I'm doing is totally fine. And I've been making a big deal about it for nothing, So I sit down. I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling relaxed. I'm feeling like everything's okay. Go to bed happy that night. Wake up the next day and decide I'm going to go visit it again if it's not a big deal, right? So I go down and it is gone. Along with any hope of me ever having a normal sexual future. Just kidding. Sort of. But what kind of came with all that was an immense amount of humiliation. And just a sense that wow, what I have done must be really, really bad, because my parents won't even talk to me about it. It's not even something that it's worthy of a conversation. So the guilt that I carried around for a long time after that was just awful. Didn't mean I didn't stop masturbating, but didn't have anything vibrating, so I figured out other ways to do it. But I was very, very fortunate in that when I hit my senior year in high school, I was in a game of Truth or Dare, and one of my friends, a girlfriend, admitted that she masturbated, and I swear it changed everything for me. And all this guilt was lifted, and I felt so relieved, and then I felt really angry, because I thought, this is ridiculous, that this is something that everybody's doing, and nobody's talking about. And I carried all this on me for such a long time. So eventually I felt free about it. I started talking about it more. And like you heard, I started a band called Reformed Whores. And that's all we talk about. We just talk about sex and masturbating and poop and everything no one wants to hear about. It's great. And it gives people a chance to be open to these things that they don't feel comfortable maybe talking about themselves. So I feel really good about that. So I think a lot about my parents not talking to me about this. And I think, well, why did they do that? And I think, well, number one, because they didn't want to embarrass me, but probably more importantly, they didn't want to feel embarrassed themselves in that moment. So my advice to anyone that's contemplating, maybe having a talk with their kids or not having a talk with their kids, I would say do it, because a little bit of embarrassment right now is nothing compared to the world of embarrassment you're going to face after your kids start making a living about talking about sex. Thank you.